Okay.
Let me see here. Give me a second here. Everything is good. Okay. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do along with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Amazing thinkers there. I don't know what it is there, what is there in the water of Philadelphia, or it's all Ben Franklin's fault. There is something good going on there. I'm here in New York, and Charlie, I just found out, is in Hawaii. So it's wonderful to have people from all over the place discussing comprehensivism, polymathy, and trying to connect ideas. Today, we have Charlie, and he's going to be discussing the book, The Master and His Emissary by Iain McGilchrist. And we will also be talking about his own journey, Charlie's own journey of comprehensivism. So those are the two items on the agenda. So with that, Charlie, so can you talk to me, tell us a little bit about how you discovered Iain McGilchrist, and what was your reaction the first time you encountered his work?
Well, maybe I should just preface that with a statement that in my senior year of high school, I was reading Goethe with the intention of finding out about his religion, because it was an assignment for an English class. And I came across his view of science, where he emphasized that the science at that time, which is pretty much still the same as now, that it was intrinsically nihilistic, and that it was this object properties way of looking at things, and it was deterministic too, which is, and mechanistic, and so that had been a major theme in my polymathy. And so in 2015, I was attending a class on Taoism at the University of Hawaii. I was auditing it, and one of the students in the class got into a discussion with me because I was talking about this sort of stuff. And he says, "Well, you should read this book, because it sounds like it's, he's in complete agreement with what you're saying." And so I did, and I was completely blown away, and I've been completely blown away ever since. I mean, it's just like he did kind of what I wish I could have done, but I didn't follow his path, and so but that's irrelevant. The thing is at least somebody did it, because it was like wandering in the wilderness. It was a message that most people just didn't want to hear, and even now, Iain McGilchrist gets a lot of flack. He's becoming more and more accepted by more and more people, and by people of stature. And so it's that makes me feel really good, because and I think science is changing too. There's more and more of an emphasis on relationships, in understanding that science is that relationships are important in science, put it that way. And,
wonderful. Folks, this is going to be highly interactive. So what Charlie is going to do is that he's going to do a quick introduction to the thought of this gentleman and about the book. And then there'll be plenty of time for us to raise questions, make comments. So I strongly recommend that you use pen and paper to keep track of all the ideas that are coming in your head. Yes. And keep organizing them. We will have breakout rooms where you'll be able to discuss it with other people. And then you will be able to come back, and we are going to put all the questions that everybody has on table, and then all of us will try to answer that. Okay, so please keep track of all the thoughts that are going through your head, and keep them organized so we can talk about everything, all the amazing things everybody's thinking about. All right, so Charlie, would you like to start talking?
Okay, yeah, I want to be sharing screen out with the Word document and reading from it, and kind of extemporaneous from that as well. Okay, I'll get to the top here. Okay, basically, at the present time, how people are answering the question of what is reality is the most typical is a posit facts that are independent of the observer, and these facts are used in building a view from seeing human beings basically as a receiving information. The postmodern view is that reality is all in our heads and we just make it all up. And so you know, McGilchrist says that neither of these are particularly likely. So he has this picture from Martin Escher of two hands where one is creating the other. And then he goes on to talk about elementary particles have wave particle duality, and there's complementarity with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And so these are references. Well, maybe I can. I'll put those in the chat room afterwards. Okay, these URLs.
Sure.
Okay, so one of these interesting is how life changes itself, the read-write genome. But the idea is that DNA codes dependent on the environment. For instance, genetic regulatory networks, or the new developing thing called Evo-Devo, that as a egg is fertilized, the morphogenesis, or how the creature develops, is dependent upon the environment in which it grows up. And I'm sure all of us have heard about epigenetics, so that the environment is turning on and off which genes do what. And so then this quote from John Dewey: neglect of context is the greatest single disaster which philosophical thinking can occur. And a lot of philosophy is what's called analytic philosophy, which is mostly it has to do with objects and properties, and this idea of relationships is not something that is important in a lot of present day philosophy. Another quote from John Dewey is: the self is not something ready-made, but something in continuous formation through choice of action. Okay, now the brain itself, the frontal lobes make up about 35% of the brain, and the purpose of the frontal lobes are to inhibit the rest of the brain, to stop immediate activity in order to be able to step back, to have a standing back from the immediacy of experience, is the way he puts it. This affords the ability to outwit the other. So we can basically take a reading of some other person, for instance, and we can use that information to deceive them or manipulate them. But neuroscientists usually miss out on what is more important, but that it also, this distancing allows us to empathize with other people, so that then you can make a bond. Now, McGilchrist mentions you juxtaposes Machiavelli and Erasmus, and unfortunately, I still haven't looked up Erasmus and done any readings of him. So I really am not in a position to comment upon. I have done some reading on Machiavelli. There's something called the Dark Triad. It's made up of three things. It's a psychopathy, or being a psychopath, a Machiavellianism, manipulating, and narcissism. And those are kind of go together in terms of a personality. Something is taken over by the left brain when that something is recognized as important. Okay, so basically you come into contact with a situation or whatever where it's you understand that this is really important. Okay, and how you behave within that something important is very consequential. So what happens is that the left brain functionality selects out parts or aspects that can be used in the sense of power and manipulation. So the left brain then aggregates these decontextualized parts to make up a map, just like an ordinary map that abstracts. Oh, that's supposed to be those aspects that have been proven to be most useful. Another misspelling. I should have checked this. Anyway, for the objective of prediction, control, or manipulation. Okay, language can also be a part of that process. Words that refer to the elements of the map, so that you put names that are part of the mapping process. But it's the language is referential, so you're pointing to things, for the most part, or particular actions, manipulative actions that will help you attain what it is you want to do. Where the left brain is really good at that kind of a thing. But here's some pictures of hemispheric differences. These are here you can see this tree where both of the hemispheres are functioning. They did this with a a magnet that basically can shut down part of the brain. Okay, so you can shut off the left brain or you can shut off the right brain. And this is if you draw a tree with both sides, you end up with this kind of thing. If it's left hemisphere only, then you get this really strange thing where there's a tendency for the left hemisphere to just cut off things like that on the left. And here's the right hand, and you can see that the right hand actually kind of does better than both. Here's another example of, let me see here. It's a little bit bigger so you can see it more easily. These are pictures of flowers. Here on the left-hand side, you see what happens when the subject of the experiment is asked to draw a flower, and then when they what do you call it? Make it so the right hemisphere isn't functioning. This is left only hemisphere, and here's the right hemisphere only. And again, it's kind of, you can see that the right hemisphere can do stuff like this better, obviously better than the left hemisphere, but even better than both. And I this is kind of conjecture on my part. Okay, I think that what's going on here is that really talented artists develop this skill to be able to listen to their right brain better. Okay, in fact, there was a case of a classical composer, Dmitri Shostakovich, who wrote a symphony, his fifth symphony, after having a left hemisphere stroke. And what's one of the things that blew my mind about it when I found out about this about a year ago was that Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony was my favorite of his, and has been for many years before Iain McGilchrist even began to do work on this stuff back in the 90s. Here's another example of both on the left hand. Middle is left hemisphere, and then the right hemisphere only. And you can see that in the right hemisphere, there's an awareness of perspective. It's three-dimensional. You kind of can get the feel that you're really looking at a table, a real table, and so but here on the left, it's like, it's kind of, who knows what you're looking at. And a real quick story. I was in graduate school in mathematics in Claremont, and I was sitting in the faculty student lounge for the math department, and a student, I don't remember which department, whether he was chemistry or physics or what it was, but he was an experimental science graduate student. And he kind of saw that I don't know how we somehow or other we got into a conversation, and he asked me, why do people study pure math? And I said, well, basically there's two reasons why people study math, and one is that it's useful because you can use it to manipulate the environment. You can use it to make things happen. Okay, you have a power, that you can have with mathematics. But some people do it because the math is beautiful. It's kind of like a poetry or something like that, like doing art. And afterwards, a faculty member who was sitting in the lounge at that time and heard the whole conversation came up to me afterwards and kind of gave me a pearls before swine scolding, saying that I shouldn't talk about stuff like that with the applied people, because they don't understand it, and they'll just go and mock it later, and it'll just cause a lot of bad feelings, and so they don't understand. So just don't even bother to talk about it. Which I thought was kind of interesting, but anyway, so the left hemisphere depends upon abstraction and denotative language, recipes and algorithms, known, fixed, static, decontextualized, explicit, disembodied, general in nature, ultimately lifeless. Okay, I'm actually quoting from McGilchrist here. Right hemisphere is individual, changing, evolving, interconnected, implicit, incarnate, living beings. Example, this is me. Okay, in the parentheses, anthropomorphism and animistic metaphors. Like when you have a cat or a dog, you start to treat them like people, you know, and I think that there's a lot to that. I mean, I know they're not people, you know, but most of the people who come from conventional science backgrounds will start yelling anthropomorphism, anthropomorphism. You can't do that, you know. And you know, but I think that there's a lot of, you know, deep communication between pets and their owners, and everybody I know who's had a pet, you know, feels the same way. And there is some research that's being done that shows that this sense of being and relationship, what the Iain McGilchrist calls betweenness, that happens. Okay. And then for the right brain, it's something, it does things that are never perfectly known. In this world, it lives in a particular relationship instead of an objective stance. The knowledge that is mediated by the left hemisphere, however, is in a closed system. It has the benefit of perfection, but a perfection that is bought at the price of emptiness, of self-reference, like a hall of mirrors. It mediates knowledge by a mechanical rearrangement of things it already knows. So therefore, it's the right hemisphere is what permits the living world to come into being. It is from this that the represented world of left hemisphere is derived. The difference between the two, what is present and what is represented, okay, the right does what is present and the left does what is represented, is illustrated beautifully by a different concepts of truth that they hold. How would you get an idea of that? Take the following example. Okay, this is something that they did again with shutting down one side of the brain. Okay, with these magnets. So when you present to the left brain, when the left brain is the only one that's operational, what happens is you start off and you say major premise: all monkeys climb trees. Minor premise: the porcupine is a monkey. Implied conclusion: the porcupine climbs trees. Well, what happens here is each hemisphere has its own way of approaching this question. At the outset of their experiment, when the intact individual was asked, does the porcupine climb trees? She replies, using, of course, both hemispheres, does not climb. The porcupine runs on the ground. It's prickly. It's not a monkey. Annoyingly, there are, in fact, porcupines that do climb trees, but it seems that the Russian subjects and their investigators were unaware of this, and therefore, for the purposes of the experiment, it must be assumed that porcupines are not arboreal. Anyway, during the experimental temporary hemisphere inactivations, the left hemisphere of the same individual, okay, with the right hemisphere inactivated, replies that the conclusion is true, that the porcupine climbs trees since it's a monkey. And when the experimenter asks, but is the porcupine a monkey? She replies that she knows it's not. When the syllogism is presented again, however, she's a little nonplussed, but replies in the affirmative, since that's what is written. That is what's written on the card. Between the right hemisphere of the same individual, the left hemisphere inactivated, asked if the syllogism is true. How can it be true? How can it climb trees? It's not a monkey. It's wrong here? You know, if the experimenter points out the conclusion must follow from the premise stated, she replies indignantly, but the porcupine is not a monkey. And so it's kind of like it's being in the real world, whereas in the left brain, you're living in this world of abstractions. And then he goes on to talk about two periods in history: in 6th century BC in the Augustan era, and the 15th and 16th century in Europe, were times when there was a wonderful balance of the hemispheres. Isaiah Berlin, a philosopher's characterization of this Western way of thinking was, all questions can be answered, all answers can be transmitted to others, and all answers are compatible. Okay, so I put in here some references to is Robert B. Lofton. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1998, and he wrote a book recently about the crime of reason and the closing of the scientific mind. And I have some references here, but basically what he's saying is that it used to be that you could not patent ideas. It was just understood that it's like porcupines don't climb trees, okay, but now you can, okay, and so now computer programs or algorithms are being patented, and so now it's basically you aren't allowed to have an idea in your head because somebody has patented it. And if you want to have that idea in your head, you have to pay some kind of a premium to the person who patented that idea. I mean, this is how insane things have gotten. Okay, and there's also a couple of things from about how do you know what cannot be known. And one of the people that is in both of these videos is somebody named Gregory Chaitin. And he's a really interesting person. And unfortunately, most of the videos that he was on a few years ago are gone from the YouTube. So that's unfortunate. So anyway, at the present time, we prioritize the virtual over the real. The technical becomes important. Bureaucracy flourishes. The need for control leads to a paranoia in society. We need to govern and control everything. Everything that should be implicit becomes explicit and life is drained. Why is this happening? The left hemisphere's talk is very convincing because it shaves off everything that does not fit its model and just cuts it out. It is entirely self-consistent, largely because it's made itself so, and is therefore very compelling. And then a quote from Einstein: "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." And this is an article that was written back in somewhere around 2000 by some people in Spain. And what they did was they did a mathematical analysis of how the evolution of contemporary Western popular music. And basically what they found is that since the 60s, popular music has just basically gone into the toilet. It's just become very mechanistic. It's there's no real depth to it. There's no creativity. It's become formulaic, and so this is something I've noticed. I always kind of felt a little bit embarrassed about pointing it out, but since I come from, I came of age in the mid 60s, and so here I am saying, well, my music is a lot better than your music, and I thought, well, that's kind of chauvinistic, but these people actually did a mathematical analysis of it, and basically proved that my intuition was correct, and I think there's a lot of people who feel the same way. Anyway, that's it. Okay, so I guess I can stop share. Did I make 10 minutes or not?
Thank you. No, you did a good job. We are at 9:27, so about 15 minutes or so. That's okay. Perfect. That's perfect. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is, so I want to divide this meetup into two parts. One is about these ideas, and second is going to be Charlie's experience with comprehensivism. I think what we should do is that we should do breakout rooms now to discuss these ideas, to formulate our questions, and then we can come back and ask, kind of see what questions we have, the shape of the questions. I want to do this in a particularly thorough way because I want to, we want to do a series on this book, a book club on this book, where we go through it chapter by chapter. Okay, so I want to see where different people are, what kind of questions that they have, what kind of interest that they have in this topic. This topic connects to many, many, many ideas that we have been studying. It connects with the idea of order and chaos that is key idea of Jordan Peterson. It connects with the idea of nature and culture that you see in Tao Te Ching, or yin and yang that you see in Tao Te Ching. And the list goes on and on. It relates to, we did about 50 meetups on Carl Jung. It relates to the relationship between the unconscious and the conscious. And the list goes on and on. So it's a huge topic, and this is a really interesting take on it. So what I want to do, so Joe and Becky and Charlie, I was originally thinking of doing kind of the huddle now, but let's do that later on, because I want each of you to head a breakout room to see where different people are, to lead the discussions in it. so that you get a sense of where interest and knowledge of the people is. Okay. So folks, in the breakout room, we have certain rules that have worked really, really well for us. Okay. The breakout rooms are going to run for about 20 minutes. We're going to start by letting everybody talk 1 to 2 minutes on their takes on the ideas so far. So many things get put on the table, and then there'll be a general discussion. The aim is to come back with the best question that you have. Okay, you can learn from questions of others, and we can then come up with like a map of all the questions that we have, and then we'll figure out how we're going to answer them. All right, so the rules in the breakout rooms is, first is this procedure. The second is that keep on topic. Third, be brief. There's a lot of people who have a lot of interesting things to say. So please be brief so you can hear other people. And number 4, feel free to disagree with anybody on anything, but do so courteously. All right. The people with the star in their names are going to be the facilitators. It's going to be Charlie, Becky, and Joe. We're going to run the breakout rooms for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back here and start with questions. And then we're going to go to the second part, which is going to be story, the polymath experience of Charlie. Charlie, does that make sense?
Yeah, that works really well for me.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm starting the breakout rooms now. Go from there. All right. Let's see here. I want to make sure everybody's in mute. Okay. It's going to be Joe, Laura, Jyoti, and Allison. Joe.
So during one of our previous Comprehensivist Wednesdays, we watched a video where the individual was having seizures, and they were violent seizures that actually could impact and ultimately result in death. So they actually removed half the brain from the individual. I don't know if you recall that video, but so my question is then, if you go through a procedure like that, are you unable to imagine or reason? And because then it would seem, he says, you need both hemispheres in order to actually both, for reasoning anyway. So is that individual incapable of reasoning? I know that's a very kind of challenging question, maybe a little bit out there. There's also another quick question that might be worth asking you. And if I'm jumping ahead, I know Judy actually had brought this up in our room, that who are their Iain McGilchrist's detractors, and why do they disagree with him, like with his theories? Like, what are the prevailing theories that disagree with Iain McGilchrist?
Okay. So what happens if you lose one half of your brain, and what do the detractors have to say? Okay. Next, thanks, Joe. Next up is going to be Laura, Jyoti, Allison, Mike, David, Kevin, and the magical Mike. Laura.
I was thinking more about the idea, like if we change in school, if we begin to teach kids how to learn, and we change the process about how they think overall, and we allow them to explore and do deeper kind of enriched thinking, will we change the way their brains function overall?
Wonderful. Thank you. If we teach kids differently, focusing on exploration, will their brains, the way their brains operate, change? Very good. Next up is going to, lost the track here, is going to be Jyoti, followed by Allison. Jyoti.
Yeah, brain is plastic by nature. So can the brain compensate for each other's deficits?
Okay, very good. Given the plasticity of brain, can it compensate for deficits? Thank you. Next up is Allison.
Why have we become more of a left brain society than a right brain society?
Oh, fantastic question. Why have we become left-brained? We become left-brain society. Okay, excellent. Next up is Mike.
My question is there something different in the brain chemistry of a polymathic thinker as opposed to someone who is more incisive and specialized?
Wonderful. Is the brain chemistry of a polymath different from a specialized person? Excellent. Next up is David, followed by Kevin. David.
Yes, I was curious what the relationship is between Julian Jaynes' bicameral mind and McGilchrist's left and right hemisphere theories.
Wonderful. What's the relationship between bicameral mind, Julian Jaynes' bicameral mind, and Iain McGilchrist, right and left? Excellent. Next up is Kevin, followed by Mike. Kevin.
Yeah, my assumption is we are a left brain society. My question would be, does the right brain get rusty because of a lack of practice?
No, can you repeat the question again?
Does the right brain get rusty because of lack of practice, more focus on the left brain?
Get rusty in
Or degrade.
Thank you. Next up is actually Bunny, followed by Mike. Bunny.
It's okay. I'm just going to listen.
Sure. Next up is Mike, followed by Judith.
This mic or the other mic?
This mic.
Okay.
Question though.
Pardon?
You to ask a question.
Question. If a person is right-handed or left-handed, does it all switch? And a related question is, the first time I read this thing, I came to the conclusion that the left brain was the master and the right brain was the emissary. After reading some more material, including some of his examples, I'm not so sure about it. So your opinion, opinion and the rest of the people's opinion on that.
Fantastic question, Mike. Which brain is master and which brain is emissary and why? Next up is Judith, followed by Jeff. Judith.
I'd like to understand more about that censoring function, because in the breakout room, I kind of had assumed incorrectly or guessed that maybe the left brain was being censored since to trim away the input there. So that's why, the drawings might be only the right half or the right half of the whatever. So like deleting extraneous information, but then it was pointed out that no, it's actually the right hemisphere that gets censored. So now I'm wondering, what is the purpose? Is it happening in the prefrontal lobe? Is that where the censoring happens to censor the different hemispheres? Is it only the right hemisphere that gets censored? And what is getting censored? Is it a social adaptation that humans have, that they have so much more of that? I just want to understand it better.
Wonderful. Excellent question. And this is a big point that he makes about the brain. So what is the role of censoring function or inhibitory function? And how does it work on right brain, left brain? And how does it work in life? That's excellent question. Next up is Jeff, followed by David and Ann. Jeff.
I didn't write down the exact sentence, Charlie, that you were reading there, but I remember that it had to do with the significance of the relationship between context and nuance and philosophy, and just how important that connection was, and how significant the cutting that relationship apart is. And I wonder about it, because I find myself in a lot of situations trying to consider context to so many different things and observations.
Okay, excellent. So I will focus it on context. So
Yeah.
what is the proper way of keeping the context alive in your thinking? And what happens when you don't? So role of context in thinking, which is again a very big theme.
Thank you, Shrikant.
Thanks. Next up is Govert and Laura. Govert.
Yeah, it starts to look more like a three-part brain, with the frontal lobe having such an important part to play. And it's not only negative, of course, the frontal lobe, because there's a lot of rationality going on there. So maybe, you know, I'm getting towards a three-part brain schematism here.
Okay,
is that correct? Let's put it in
Wonderful.
a question like that.
Excellent, excellent. So is it a two-part brain, or a three-part brain, or a four-part brain? Because there is a back which is visual, visual dominant as well, or maybe these four are combined in different ways, or these three are combined in different ways. So is it two-part, three-part, four-part brain? What's the best way of thinking about it? Thank you, Govert. Laura, what's your question?
I'm wondering, you're saying that the left side of the brain is becoming more dominant, that we're becoming, but we're failing more and more as a nation, a country, in areas when we test our students, you know, we're getting worse and worse in math and science and so forth. So that, you know, how is it on the one hand, we're becoming stronger as thinkers in that way, but the children that we're rearing and bringing up educationally are getting worse and worse. So that's all.
Thank you.
A little bit of a
How is it that a society which is left-brained and is trying to institutionalize left brain produces children who are, the education system produces children that are not particularly good at left brain functions like math or science? Excellent. Okay, so this is fantastic thing. So I'm going to start with more general questions and then go ahead. So what we're going to do, Jyoti, you had a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, the frontal cortex, which has executive functioning. So does not it travel from right to the left? Like, doesn't it have both the compartments in it?
Okay, so the question is, I'll put that in the context of the prefrontal cortex. What is the structure of the prefrontal cortex, and how does it relate to left brain and right brain? Judy.
Yeah, this is a subtext of a book that McGilchrist wrote called Ways of Attending, and the title is Ways of Attending, but underneath the title it says How Our Divided Brain Constructs the World. And I want to know more about that subtext, how our divided brain constructs the world, since in this book he says that the left brain is following orders, well, is asked to follow order by the right brain, but the right brain is the one who's the master. But the left brain wants to dethrone the master. So, and then he goes about explaining as a way of attending. So I want to know, what does he mean by how our divided brain constructs the world?
Wonderful.
Basically.
Thank you. Excellent question. Let's go ahead, and I'm trying to organize the questions. I'm going to start with questions which are more general. So let's see. So one of the big questions at a more general level is, which of these is the master and which is the emissary? The next one is going to be, what is the role of prefrontal cortex with respect to these? So I'm thinking of starting with those, and then we will go further than that. Let me see how we're doing on time. So Charlie, here is what I'm proposing. I will pose the questions and then let everybody answer. Try to keep your answers short. Okay. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to see where we are. We're trying our best to answer as best as we can. And this is a process of exploration. Just try to keep your answers short so we can go through as much as possible. And then towards the end, I'll have Charlie give his answer to the question before we move on to the next one. Charlie, does that make sense? That's what we do for Nietzsche. Does that work for you?
That's fine. That's yeah. I just want to emphasize that I do not consider myself an expert in quite a few of those questions. My answer is I don't know. So
Absolutely, absolutely, folks.
So yeah, so please don't put me in a position where I'm supposed to be an expert.
Right, exactly. So I'll call you in the middle. How about that? So please, I mean, all of us here are trying to learn this topic.
Yeah.
None of us are experts. I would like to, we'll at some point, if you could put in chat whether you have read the book or watched a video. So you can either say V for video, only video. If you have read the book, put a B, okay, a B or a book in the chat. So we have some idea if, where people are. Okay, so let's start with Mike's question about master and emissary. Let me elaborate on it. Like, for example, when you look at the Chinese philosophy, they talk about yin yang, and there is no master and emissary in yin yang. There is no kind of order, hierarchical order in that. There is just kind of going back and forth. And many people, in the culture certainly thinks that our Western culture certainly thinks that the left brain is the master and right brain is an underling. McGilchrist is saying that it's the right brain which is the master and left is the emissary. So these are all various positions. So what do you guys think about that? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to answer. Do you think them as equal, both required? Is there any hierarchy between them? For example, let me remind you, yesterday we talked about number 25, where it says, heaven follows the Tao, earth follows the heaven, and humans follow the earth, which is the opposite of this structure. So, and then of course, yin yang, it's kind of equal and they're kind of going back and forth. So what is it? Let's start with Judith.
I think the left brain thinks it's in control. The right brain knows that both are needed. So it's happy to defer. I do think both are necessary, but it's clear from the pictures that were shown that if I were just to have one, I kind of think I want to have my right side.
Thank you. And it's good that we have both, so you don't have the option of one if we just look at this one. But great point. You're right. I mean, the thing is that if you go further back in evolution, it's the equivalent of right brain, which is there. The next one is going to be Allison, Mike, and Gobert. Allison.
I think that we need both. I don't think one is really more important than the other. I just think that, especially with the rise of technology, we have this idea that's really all about left brain, but it's really not, because to be really good at computers, you have to be really creative. And all the new innovations with it are done by very, very creative people. And then also the art world is really incorporating, whether it doesn't even matter if it's music, art, dance, they're all incorporating technology and they're using both. So I think we've always needed both.
Thank you. Next up is Mike, followed by Gobert, Kevin, and Joe. Mike. Mike, you need to unmute, and 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, please.
Which mic?
Sorry, the magical and real Mike.
Okay.
Magical comes first and real comes second, apparently.
That's in the original legend. That's how it works. I copied that. I have no original thoughts.
Go ahead.
What set me off on that struggle is there was he brings in Nietzsche as his inspiration. Brian, not Ian does, and he says that there was a battle between the left brain and the right brain. And the guy with the detail said that he didn't need a supervisor. He was creative and he could run the show himself. And what ends up happening is that the left brain does a firm censoring of it. So in the right brain, which has all the detail, Schrodinger's cat could be both alive and dead at the same time. There's too much detail. And Nietzsche described a society that was run on too much detail and ran itself into ruin. And Ian expands on that. And after reading that example, I was still confused. So,
thank you.
One more point. Even though in the bibliography he acknowledges Julian James, and I think even Brian McVeigh, he doesn't use any of that material.
Got it.
So it sounds like he was an independent. He stayed independent of those two.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is Govert, Kevin, Joe, and Laura. Govert.
As I understand Gilchrist is that he sees that the right part of the mind is the better embodied part. It's better embedded in its own environment. I would add to that so it is more circumspective. So that is awareness of contextuality. Its knowledge is also more tacit knowledge. It has like to do with physical skills of being in the world and find your way around without having really to think about it. You know, the way you go through a room, there's a lot of contextual, embedded, embodied knowledge and skill coming into play. And so that part might have more knowledge in a certain way, might be more wise, but the left part has its own advantages, and that's that it can abstract away from this embeddedness, from this being totally integrated into the here and now. It can take distance, it can take temporal distance, it can take spatial distance, and therefore it can look ahead more. And I would say that, and we'll address that, I think, later with connections with Julian James, that the introspective inner mind phenomenon is very much a left brain part, but it draws also on the right part, but it's very much a left brain part. And
so Govert, let me ask you, you've done a fantastic job of delineating these two. Which one is the master and which one is the emissary?
Because the right part very often knows already what it will do before the left part has figured it out by thinking it through. So I think the right part sometimes just guides the left part towards certain conclusions. The conclusions might even not be totally rational or consistent. So I think it's the right part, but indeed the left part likes to compartmentalize everything, gets everything under control, because the left part wants to see all the pieces of the puzzle, so it can make these abstractions and to make decisions that go beyond the here and now. And then, yeah, of course, everybody is saying that, yeah, there has to be a balance. But that has to be worked out of what that actually really means to have a balance between these two parts.
Wonderful, wonderful, great observation. And I like the final observation about balance. It's not enough to just say balance, because you need to know the criteria, the standard for it. So thank you. Next up is Kevin, Joe, Laura, and Becky. Kevin.
Yeah, my answer is it depends on the person based on education and occupation. As general, education training is for workers, not for thinkers. So from this case, would be left brain dominate. For example, it depends on task, project, practice, they use the left most. People learning music, art, philosophy, maybe you write most. We try, you can imagination, polymath way, right? And so for mathematics, language focus, would be a left brain. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
By the way, I share one more is right brain doesn't talk. So that's one disadvantage for the right brain. Left brain, we can write, can, express self, we can show what we're doing right away. So you can see it, oh, you're powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Joe.
Is it okay if I ask you to repeat the question again, just so I'm sure
Yes.
I'm making sure?
So the question is, which one is master and which one is emissary?
Yeah.
There are multiple views of it. There are, there is, okay. Do you need more or?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's, I mean, I can see where people would favor one or the other, and I can see why McGilchrist is saying that right brain is the master. So I understand all that, but he also says it's dialectical in order for it to reason, and that you need both sides, and he uses a Hegelian approach to this way of how our brain works. Is that how you synthesize ideas themselves? And I think that's really kind of, I hardly see it. I don't see it as one being more dominant than the other. That's the thing that I'm finding to be interesting about this, is how he says that the master follows the unnecessary. Because I really think if you're only one, then that really has a huge impact on how you view the world, and it would actually skew your view of the world, and it would have a really negative impact. That's my thought. So I don't think it's either.
Thank you. Charlie, would you like to comment?
Yeah, okay. I would like to point out that from me and McGilchrist's point of view, it's not a matter of is, it's a matter of should. Okay. So what he's saying is that the right brain should be the master. Okay, if things are working properly, the right brain, which is contextualized, which is embodied, that it is in contact with the real world, so to speak, more so than the left. The left works with representations, and it becomes it's comfortable with abstractions and closed systems, that sort of thing, so that which can be very useful. I mean, you look at modern science. You have the different orbital levels of molecules, the SPDF, and you can deduce from those what kind of chemical reactions will happen if you put different molecules together, and so it's very useful. Okay, that way of thinking, but at the same time, since the left brain being dominant, it doesn't see the big picture. Okay, so what happens is you have people who think that scientists are like Promethean gods or something, that they can do anything, that they're masters of the universe, and they're not. They're just human beings, and they have a tool, and it's kind of like for those who have seen a Fantasia, the Disney cartoon thing. There's instead of Master and the Emissary, it's Merlin and Mickey Mouse is the apprentice. So so a similar idea, so Mickey Mouse thinks that the Merlin leaves the cottage and tells Mickey Mouse that he wants him to sweep up clean up around the cottage, and so Mickey thinks, well, I've got this tool, I got this, I have this magic, and I can just make the broom go and clean up the house by itself. And what happens is that the broom goes just completely berserk because he doesn't know what he's doing, and makes a huge mess. And that's kind of what's happening today, is that people have lost context. They don't understand that you start putting poison in the environment, guess what's going to happen? The environment is going to start dying. And if you start putting all kinds of hydrocarbons into the air, carbon dioxide and methane and so on, there are going to be consequences. And so it's being able to see the larger picture is what the right brain is good at. And also the thing about the person who's in my group, I'm really terrible about names, brought up this thing about the frontal lobe, and I didn't understand her question, okay, when she brought it up in the group, and the breakout room, basically, this whole idea of distancing, it happens on both sides of the brain. Okay, so that it's kind of like the frontal lobes are able to do this distancing thing. So it's able to kind of step back. It's kind of like being able to look at yourself or to reflect on yourself. But both sides do it. Okay, and in the process of doing that, you can use both the left and the right potentialities to assess your relationship with your environment, and you can do a left brain approach and be Machiavellian and see how you can lie to people and manipulate them and so on, or you can be more like a wise sage like Lao Tzu, and look at how you can contribute to making a better society and so on, and and this ties in also with the bicameral mind. That Iain McGilchrist talked about Julian Jaynes, and he said basically he got it wrong. He got it just turned around. That he was saying that before the axial age, that people didn't have this ability to be conscious of the world, but it was just the opposite. Basically, before the axial age, people were more right brain dominant. And they didn't put a lot of stock in abstract ideas. So that kind of way of thinking, that left brain way of thinking in terms of abstractions, it just didn't exist, so what happened was that prior to the axial age, the right brain was more dominant in how people thought. They had all these ideas like in the Iliad and the Odyssey and all that pre-axial age art was that they didn't think that way. They didn't think in terms of abstractions, and so their thinking was basically right brain dominant, and so that so that's I just wanted to I thought I could get all of those questions, together into one group.
That's fine. We're going to go through them one by one.
Yeah. And so,
thank you.
So that, yes. So
yeah.
That's that.
Thank you. And I agree that I think Julian Jaynes and Iain McGilchrist are exactly opposite on this point. And that's a crucial difference. And that's a very good question. Next up is going to be Laura, Becky, Bunny, Judy, and Joe. Laura, so the question on the table.
Just before you do that, there's one thing that another question that was along this line was whether there's, and that's this about the frontal lobes is something that when Gilchrist was talking about Julian Jaynes, is that there are this 4 parts. Okay, you got the left and the right, but you got the front and the back, and so yes,
we will go ahead and bring that question up next. So the plan is to ask this question, which is the emissary and which is the master. Then next one we'll say, is it 3 parts or is it 4 parts? What's going on? And the next one is going to be on context. So those are the 3 questions coming up. Okay. So currently, because that way we can kind of zoom, kind of focus in on that, get everybody's views together on each of those topics. Next up is going to be, folks, the topic is, who is the master and who is the emissary? Laura, what do you think?
I don't know. I can't say for my brain. I mean, I lost a lot from the right frontal cortex. So, I mean, large memory loss of my short-term memory and midterm memory. And I know I've lost a lot of cognitive things. And I understand them when it comes up. Like there'll be things like, hey, I should have known that. I used to know that. And so there are all these things like that. And so, but I don't know how to put it, to make it work. Like, I don't know how to fix these things that I know that when I see them, I know them, and I should be able to fix it. There should be some therapy that'll allow me to make these things work and put my brain back together in my frontal lobe so that it can be, I think, that the master of it, because there is a lot of thinking there, and it does control a lot in your body also in terms of its function. So I think the right frontal lobe is really important, that it's a primary source. That's from my perspective, because I also know how functioning in your legs and your nervous system, and there's all kinds of stuff involved. So I'm going to go with that, even though I can't be certain for sure. But
thank you. Thank you, Laura. Okay. Next up is going to be Becky, Bunny, Judy, Ian, and Joe. Becky.
So I would say that the right side would be the master and the left side would be the emissary, but it doesn't mean that it's like a strict hierarchy where the master dictates everything downward. It's that intertwined relationship, and there's a need for both. And Iain McGilchrist actually warns against the idea of this of reductionism of just left and just right, and they're completely separate. But because that's not the case. Like for language, I know that Kevin had mentioned, yes, the left side controls the speaking, but the right side controls the nuances to understand the subtleties of language to make it possible. So they're all joined together that way. And so there's a need for both. But then like linking it back to the idea of Kahneman, still you see that back and forth with like the intuition being real quick and kind of leading things. But then the left brain with its rationality saying, hey, wait a minute. And so, but oftentimes the left side is trying to rationalize what the right side is bringing in. So it's that training and then feeding it back that you can see that relationship that occurring. So once again, it's not a strict hierarchy, and then I guess the last part I want to bring up was McGilchrist claims that if you're stronger with your right side, with your intuition, often that correlates with your ability to reason better. So kind of go back to like better master, better emissary.
This is very, very rich material, Becky, because it's just so many questions. We're talking about, for example, Western world being left dominant. I think East, like for example, the Chinese that we are looking at, especially Dao, is very much right-brained dominant. And they're very like, they're concerned about names and naming. So it's like cultures are different. Cultures have different, cultures have taken different paths. People take different paths. There are consequences to those paths. If you focus on one, you can do certain things better. If you focus on the other, you can do certain things better. And clearly both of them need like correction from each other. Otherwise they can go ways off in their own way. So it's really, really fascinating question. So I'm really intrigued by the questions that are being brought up here. Next up is Bunny, followed by Judy, Ian, and Joe. Bunny.
So I can only give you my own personal perspective. I've had brain surgery, and years and years later, I had another trauma, and I had neurofeedback. And the psychiatrist told me that my one side of my brain is compensating the other side of the brain. And in regards to what was asked earlier in another room about a girl who had half of her brain, there's actually a couple of girls who've had that. I've noticed that their moods are more better in some ways. Their mind is more in a positive state than the people who have a full brain, for example, and have mental health issues, mental illness. So I always think that there's an open possibility of where there's no one set way, because our anatomy is all made differently. And so these are all just guesses that we're saying. But for even myself, who had a left temporal lobe removed, I'm not good at languages, but I'm very analytical. So I'm not good at art, but I am very communicative. So I think it's just going to be very different from everybody, and there's no set structure.
Wonderful, thank you. And kind of the implicit thing here is that the plasticity of brain and ability of the brain to kind of, it's just the plasticity of the brain is just mind-boggling, and the different levels at which it operates. And I don't even know the levels, like different levels. Like if you are in a group of people who are focused on one way, how does your brain kind of operate in response to that? I think there's all kinds of really amazing questions. Next up is going to be Judy, Joe, and Jyoti. Judy. Judy, you need to unmute.
I don't think the right brain wants to be the master. I think it's totally unattached, because the right brain loves patterns, and they love archetypes, and it loves metaphors, and it's a metaphorical mind. I don't know if anybody read the book of Bob Samples called The Metaphoric Mind, long time ago. And so it's not really that interested, but we'll accept, whatever it is that goes into whatever the left brain wants to do. It's fine. It's just no big deal. I don't think the right brain is attached. I really don't think so.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. Next up is Ian, actually. Ian, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. A couple of questions, or maybe insights or whatever. Let's see. The right hemisphere is said to have more global focus, and the left hemisphere more narrow focus, which more things. Also, I think the author indicates that the left hemisphere is more active in angry states, which involve a narrowing of a focus onto presumably the object of enragement, so to speak. A couple questions come to mind. One wonders about the mechanism. Well, actually, in all mental states, presumably both hemispheres are involved, but in a given mental state, one more so than another, perhaps. There's factual involvement. Neither is clearly dominant in any case, but the fraction of activity in each changes according to mental state. One wonders what triggers basically the neurological mechanisms sort of like that trigger maybe dominance of one hemisphere or the other in the shift and everything. And also, this also implies a difference possibly in connectivity with lower brain centers. Now, MacLean's triune brain model has been largely discredited because it was one of the things was simply too simplistic, almost a caricature, since it actually postulated that areas that evolved during reptilian ancestors and our primate mammalian ancestors were radically different and something operated autonomously. This is not the case, but nonetheless, presumably there is some anatomical difference in the hemispheres interaction with lower, shall we say, lower brain center involved with emotion and the like, and that's intriguing to ponder. Again, a more complex version than McLean postulated, but nonetheless, still it leads to that speculation, possibly rather esoteric, but still.
Thank you, Ian. That's a great point to bring in, that it's not just left and right. It's not just left, right, and prefrontal, but there is also, there is the back, which is the kind of visual, and then there is the brain stem, and there is the amygdala, which is the older part of the brain, which is neither right or left. And that actually is related to a lot of, things which are much more primitive than these. And the connections with that also are something that we'll look at when we look at, is it 1, is it 2, is it 3, is it 4, maybe 5. We'll look at that. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Jyoti. Joe.
So I have a little bit better of an idea now that I was actually thinking this through when Charlie said it's not necessarily, he said that the right brain should be the dominant one versus it actually is, and so that opens up my mind a little bit. And to be perfectly honest, I was listening to this and listening to the video and doing something at the same time, so I may have missed that part. But if you think about it, this is where it really kind of gets close to what we're talking about with order and chaos, and with Jordan Peterson. Specifically, like you can talk about how the left brain is essentially trying to impose order on the right brain, and it's logic based. So then, okay, you ask yourself what one should dominate. Well, if you think about it from a completely just logical, rationalist perspective, that's a very scary way of looking at the world. Because then you can no longer challenge your map of the world, and that your understanding of the world is totally based on your rational thinking from what you understand from your frame. Whereas the right brain allows you to imagine and challenge the ideas in the left brain. And that's critical, because that's what allows us to empathize, that's what allows us to imagine, that's what allows us to actually come to a certain degree of understanding. And so this is now, like, this makes all complete sense, even in the sense of how if you were to take totally a rationalist culture, it wouldn't function or you would be very scared of it. I could tell you that, in the sense that you think about some of the most rational cultures in the world, or in world history, that you would probably be a little bit nervous about, because if they're looking at it from their worldview and they're not looking at it from an imaginative point of view, it could be very dangerous. That's all. And so I think this is why he's saying, this needs to, all of it kind of makes sense now. And I see how it maps directly to Jordan Peterson. It also, maps to another book called Mythos and Logos that I'm reviewing. Mm-hmm. These are all very similar concepts, but I understand. And then you could see Hegel, and you could see philosophy, and you can see how all these things kind of work together as to why you can't strictly be a rationalist culture, and as to why the right brain actually should dominate, not necessarily.
Excellent. So on that note, let's do one thing. It's going to be Becky next, but let me ask you one question for everybody. Which brain do you think should dominate? We're talking about should, okay? Right or left? So go ahead and type in right or left in the chat. You can say R or L if you want, or you can say right or left. Becky, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm stating something that's obvious, because we've all been addressing like the properties of like, or the functions of master and emissary as like dominant and subservient. But like the idea of a master of the house is that he knows what's going on. like on a high level, and the servant needs to know something on a super detailed, his function very well. So I don't know if this is like stating the obvious, but like our left side knows, it's like the arrogance of the left, enclosed system, as Charlie had mentioned. Like it knows what it knows, and if you try to tell it otherwise, it gets angry and it rages out. But the right hemisphere, it doesn't just know what it knows. It brings in what's on the border of conscious and unconscious, and then it vets it through and kind of pushes it down. So I hope I'm not stating the most obvious, but like the master of the house has to know a lot of things of what's going on, and it doesn't have always have the luxury of knowing everything specifically. And
No, go ahead.
And then just to answer your last question, I think most people are going to answer R based on whether or not they're intuitive, or
Yes.
L based on if they're like a strong sensor. So
Yes.
I'm good. That's my guess.
Excellent. I think that's true. All right, this was very good. And by the way, it's never, I think it's always a good idea to state the obvious, because many times obvious is held implicitly by most people, but it's not fully explicated. So it helps a great deal to establish a good context. All right, now I want to switch gears and move to the topic of context. Because what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to hit the big themes of Iain McGilchrist. So the question is, what is the role of context in thought? What happens when you drop the context, when you miss the context? How important is it to keep the context? Because this, left brain tends to drop the context many times. And what are the consequences of it? So any thoughts about context? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Let's start with Evanique.
Yeah, I've been listening, and I would say just context is of utmost importance. And the reason why is because it's the reason for it. So like if you're trying to solve the problem, you have to look at it in context, or if you're trying to find a solution for a problem, rather, you got to look at the context of the problem, because as many times, like you can see when people try to solve problems and they don't know the context, they wind up either creating more problems or not solving the problem that the real problem that is there. So it's like you're not even paying attention to what is really going on in the background. So I think context is just essential.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Let's see. Let me find out what's going on here. Okay. Next up is going to be Joe, Ian, Mike, and Judith. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, context is essential, because if we have this thought that data isn't biased, or that mathematical or analytical thinking isn't biased, that it's completely without its own without its own problems. And so we look at, show me the numbers. That's what we'll often say to ourselves. And if you don't have context around those numbers, then those numbers are absolutely meaningless. So that you can't detect anomalies, and you actually can't come up with a real pragmatic solution to a problem, because you're basing it off of again, a specific period of time, and just off of your logic, what you understand of the world. So if you don't have that, that your ability to incorporate and synthesize data with the time periods that you're actually analyzing, then it's actually completely worthless and actually can lead you to a lot of false premises. So
wonderful. Thank you. Great observation, Joe. Thanks. Next up is Ian, Mike, and Judith. Ian.
Okay, as far as context, I'm thinking actually there may be instances where it's beneficial or profitable to drop the context, where basically it's as if the context is a framed debate, so to speak, to use that expression. Sometimes sometimes it can be advantageous to try to escape from the frame, or to seize it and build it anew. As the saying goes, think outside the box. I'm reminded of this line from Sun Tzu's The Art of War, where he counsels that extreme situations like war and other extreme conflict or duress, it's often pays to think wildly unorthodox means. So I'm suggesting that that by dropping the context, while it can indeed lead to gibberish or sometimes disaster, it can also lead sometimes to cases which open the door to wins, either through creativity or through sometimes basically random luck, like you're rolling a die in a casino. In any case, sometimes the left hemisphere may do us a favor by simply dropping the context and allowing us to forge new terrain, so to speak.
Thank you, Ian. Next up is going to be Mike, followed by Judith. Mike.
I think context gives an extra layer in presentation, whether you're speaking or you're watching, for example, a TED Talk. Even tonight, it happened when Charlie was giving his presentation and he stopped. He said, I'm going to tell you a quick story. And he was talking about studying mathematics in school and how an applied mathematician might not quite get whatever that conversation was about. But the second Charlie said, let me tell you a quick story, it immediately provided a context for me. I'm just that kind of learner. So the second I hear it being said in the context of a story, my ears perk up and the information goes in and stays in for me. So I think context is extremely, extremely important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Let's go to Judith, Govert, and then Charlie. Judith.
Yeah, I wanted to say that most times I think context is essential, extremely important, that you won't even get correct answers if you don't understand the history or the context. But the points that, was it Ian just spoke to, were very interesting, and I kind of like them. And I do see that point of view too. There are times when it might be a good idea to throw that throw the context or whatever the baggage that you have away to see things in a fresh way, perhaps. So that was interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judith. Next up is Govert, followed by Charlie.
Yeah, so McGilchrist has quite some interesting philosophers incorporated in his book. Heidegger is there, Nietzsche is there, Dreyfus, who I'd like to talk about maybe later, who is a Heidegger scholar in the United States at Berkeley. And Heidegger's sense of the meaning of language, because if we talk about context, we can talk about, verbal contexts, intellectual, like when you do a science or when you're talking, anything verbal. And of course, then coming back to the right part of the brain, we have context of being embedded and embodied in a world, which Heidegger explicates as, there are so many things that refer to each other, creating a context. So, you sit at your desk and all kinds of things are interconnected. Your mouse is interconnected with your screen, and then your lamp has a specific angle, and that's part of the practical context. Also with instruments, the hammer is to hammer a nail into the wood. The wood is then used to make a wall. The wall is a part of a house. The house is then in order for humans to live. So there is a whole series of what Heidegger calls in order to. A in order for B, B in order for C, etc., etc. So you can get very specific, especially Heidegger did that in explicating this instrumental and practical context of our daily lives. And only when you're embedded in such a context can language arise, because it's always referring back to that context, though it can, overlook or abstract, etc. So yeah, context goes back to the right brain, and the right brain just knows way more context than the left brain.
Thank you, Govert. Next up is going to be Charlie, followed by Jeff. Charlie.
Yeah, I agree with who was it who said that Iain had really hit on something, and I agree very much. One of the basic concepts of Iain McGilchrist is this idea of betweenness. And so when you have a relationship, the relationship is something that's living, okay, that is created by the people who are participating in the relationship. Sometimes it's not. I mean, sometimes it's like a musician with his instrument, or I believe you brought that up, Shrikant, about that your relationship with sound, it actually changes how you hear things. So musicians hear differently than regular people, and artists. I took an art class on watercolors, and I was shocked one time when I was going home, and there was a sunset, and I couldn't believe how many colors I was seeing. It was like they were always there, but I didn't see them until I had been going through this training with art, and so the thing is
Charlie, can I interrupt to tell a very interesting anecdote here, to add the context. Leonardo has this entire piece, entire argument on how to see, And the first time I heard it, what do you mean how to see? I have eyes. He said, no. You actually have to learn how to see. So he says, okay, what's the best way to do that? So first part of it is that you have to actually draw in order to see. So you have to actually produce. When you start producing something, then you have this entire loop going on between your motor faculties and your input faculties, sensory faculties, okay? And then he says, if you want to see color, if you want to learn to see color, what you need to do is that you need to go and look at human faces during sunrise or sunset. Because what is happening is that, and see how brilliant this is, because the way in which our eyes are, they are really good at figuring out what's going on with human faces. Every shade. What is happening during sunset is that the amount of light is changing, the color of light is changing, and you're seeing many different faces in that. So your ability to make fine distinctions and seeing what that impact is goes through the roof. If you do that, and you add to that actually trying to capture it in painting, and then now you're talking. Go ahead. Sorry about the interruption.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you said that, because the point I'm trying to make is that this relationship between the left brain and the right brain is dynamic, okay? And as Iain McGilchrist says, you shouldn't be looking at one or the other, but both working together. And so, like for instance, in language, you can use language in a left brain sort of way that is very mechanical and lacking completely in imagination, but it's just like working like a machine. Like when you're writing poetry or listening to poetry, language is being used in a very creative and imaginative way that is like that, because there's a big difference between, say, a married couple that have only been married a year and they've been married 50 years, okay, that they've been around each other, and it's kind of like all the rough edges have worn away, and they have a deeper relationship with each other than the people who've only been married 1 year. And so that this whole idea of relationship as a dynamic process that changes the people who are involved in the process, okay? It's not something that it's it's static. Like if you start the car, even cars their engines will wear out, so maybe that's not a good example, but there are some things where relationships are very static, and the left brain can understand that really well. But the left brain, if it has a positive relationship with the right brain, that it can be open to creating new things, okay, with the help of the right brain. And so that it's kind of like you have that little voice in your head that you kind of have an idea what's going on, but what many times this maybe there's some kind of a communication going on between the left and the right brain that there's this aha moment where, oh, I get it, you know, and I think that what's going on in those situations is just the left brain is listening to the right brain and it's not quite understanding it, but then all of a sudden there's this aha moment where, oh, okay, now I get it. And so I think that the relationship, the betweenness between people, between instruments, between, you know, just being in the world, you know, or presencing is a word that Heidegger uses. That process is fundamentally a right brain process, but it's not like the left brain is sitting there doing nothing. You know, it's involved too. And so you try to, you know, you have a relationship and you'd like to be able to talk about it. But maybe the best way to talk about it is with poetry or music or whatever, you know. So it's you try to find the medium of communication that is most appropriate for what it is you're trying to communicate. So sometimes it's language, sometimes it's something else, you know. So it's anyway, yeah. It's just, basically that's what I wanted to emphasize that you know what Iain McGilchrist talks about over and over and over and over and over. You know, it's not either or, it's both and. You know, it's both of them together.
Thank you. Next up is Jeff.
So I put both of these things into the chat just for fun. So in my experience, there really had been major decisions made in my lifetime that seemed like a good idea at the time, but did not adequately consider very relevant context and nuance that resulted in just disastrous, unanticipated consequences. And I won't go into the examples, but I'm sure you can imagine situations like that. And I'm always fond of remembering the dean of the economics department where I went to college, who actually would start every semester by asserting that there's no such thing as something that works in theory but fails in practice. If it stinks in practice, it stinks in theory. And it was always a fascinating thing for the dean of the economics department to say, okay, everything rests on this truth, so let's not pretend otherwise. And I really do think that context and nuance are underrated factors in everything from imagination to problem solving, to creating opportunities, to developing theories, and even to resilience.
Thank you, Jeff. My favorite thing on context comes from Walter Ong. He has this amazing aphorism which says, all text is pretext. Now that's shocking the first time you read it. All text is pretext. Whatever does it mean? It means that the text is trying to capture a context. And most of the times, once it has been written down, people take it and carry it with them, apart from the context, pretending that it is capturing all the context, and it is not. So in that sense, it is a pretext. It's also a play on the front that it is a pretext. So it is a start of a text. So text is never finished. It is alive. He elaborates on that when he talks about the proper relationship between writing and speaking, especially conversation. What he's saying is that when writing was originally developed and used before printing, the context in which it was used is that people would write and people would read it out to other people, and they would discuss the same book while somebody else is writing notes. So there is this going back and forth between multiple people who are bringing their own context. These are different contexts to bear on the text to get feedback. So this is, he calls it oral hermeneutics. And he's saying that that is what is needed to keep a piece of writing alive. He is a big fan of writing. Writing is very, very powerful, but it needs this rejuvenation through dialogue. And that's what we're doing here. You know, when we take Tao Te Ching and we have everybody talk about it, or we take, you know, any piece of writing and we talk about it, you see so many people's different perspectives. That is the only way of getting the context, because no matter how hard you try, your right brain is limited, and it is limited by your history. It is the repository of all your history. It's about your, it is amazing at capturing your local context. What
I was about to suggest to you.
What this does is that it allows you to capture many, many local context. So it is a dramatic way, what we are doing here is a dramatic way of bringing more context to bear on whatever we are looking at. Jeff,
I think that's terrific. I was about to suggest to you that maybe, you know, you should consider renaming 52 ideas, living ideas, to oral hermeneutics.
It is to living ideas actually speaks more, because what it has to do, what you have to calculate in the name, living ideas, it's kind of like, so firstly, it is living ideas, right? So there are, it is like, it is trying to keep it. See, oral hermeneutics is too technical a term. It doesn't cause waves in the mind. Here, living ideas, you're saying that you're living these ideas on one hand. Secondly, it is also capturing that these ideas are living. You need to make them live as ideas. And you have, there is a life. So it's connection between ideas and life on one hand. And second, it is the life of ideas. So it captures these loops in the words, which are very short, very simple, very commonly used. So it serves to cause this oral hermeneutics in a short phrase, which would not be captured by oral hermeneutics. Oral hermeneutics would denote it better, but I think this not only denotes it, but connotes what we are trying to do better. That's why I prefer living ideas to oral hermeneutics.
Does a 52 come from playing with the full deck?
No, 52 comes from once a week, 52 weeks of the year. It's something that, you know, we used to meet every week. So the idea was that you have to, ideas are important to your life. That's how you build your life, by mastering ideas and applying ideas, and you have to do it on a regular basis. And once a week was the frequency we were doing that. So if I have to change a name, I have to say 365 living ideas. But thank you. Let's go to the next question. So what, Charlie, what I'm proposing to do is that everybody is really fascinated about this topic. So let us continue on this topic, and we will do, we'll do a separate meetup on your story, because I want to give a full focus on that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm interesting enough to have a full meeting, but I'm sure.
Okay, let's do one thing. What we will do is, it's about, let's see what time it is. It's about 11 o'clock. So let's get a feedback here, because we will have plenty of opportunity of going through all these questions. What we are proposing, you know, Charlie, Becky, and Joe are planning to lead a meetup on this book. Okay, so let me ask, Charlie has spoken a little bit about why he wants to do this. Let me have Becky and Joe talk about why they are interested in leading a meetup on this book. And then I will open it up for anybody, just any comments about if you would like to join in this one, if you are excited about reading this book. Okay, so let's start with Becky. Becky, why this book?
Oh, can we throw it to Joe? I usually
okay, sure,
ideas after he talks.
Sure. Okay, Joe. Joe is very good at talking first, so I really appreciate that. Joe, you're up.
I think this book actually ties together a lot of things that I'm reading, not only within 52 Living Ideas, but within another meetup that I'm participating in. Don't worry, I'm not cheating, but but there's a Mythos and Logos meetup that we're covering about how the right brain and left brain interact. And I also think that this directly correlates to a lot of what we've learned in Maps of Meaning and Jordan Peterson as well, with chaos and order, and it relates even to the Tao and some of the other things. So I think we can really have a syntopical approach and start to see in more detail the neurological implications of some of the things that we're doing in other meetups. Not that we haven't touched upon these things, but I think that this brings a new angle to it. And I think that this also really incorporates a lot of philosophy. When I hear that, that sounds to me like that's kind of been one of those missing things a little bit from the other meetups that I mentioned, that it really incorporates. I think it has a lot to do with Hegel. I haven't read the book, but about synthesizing ideas using the right brain, and then how it really impacts our culture. That's the really interesting part to me. How it impacts our culture, how historically it may have impacted our culture, and only in being, and then what are the implications of being a left brain, a total logically based culture versus a right brain culture, and why they're both important. I think it really will highlight a lot of the importance of using both, and I think it'll bring a little bit of a new dynamic to the meetup. So this is a really good book to cover, and Charlie has also brought some really great ideas, I will say, as well, in the meetups that I've been a part of. So it'll be nice to have him here as often as possible. Like last week, he gave me something with principles and theories, and that was very helpful. So that's another added bonus.
Wonderful. Thank you. Becky.
Okay, so I got really obsessed with the Jungian cognitive functions last summer, and it was very much of like trying to understand how my brain processed a lot of things and discovering who I was, but also having Mark Stallman from the Center of Digital Life on, it just brought a lot of my own past into light, in that I was very right brain, very accepting of my intuition until I went off to university, and I almost couldn't, I felt like I couldn't reconcile because of the environment I was in, that I had to adopt this idea of like of the dominant left brain, and really throwing out everything else that I had initially was more inclined to. And so having gone through all that, but then hearing, it's like, that's not exactly what like there is room for reconciliation. And in fact, that's how our brains are meant to be. It's not meant to be segmented like that. And personally, having gone through that kind of experience has really put this whole adventure and of discovery on my map. And so I guess in many ways this is personal.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's great. So folks, has anybody else read the book? And if not, whatever you have heard so far, is this something that you would be interested in doing? And as always, the way we structure things is that reading is never required. Okay, we are always talking about things that are accessible. At the same time, if you read it, what you get out of it is probably 3 times more. So that's, that is the rule for all the meetups. And what we will do is that everybody, it's not, we'll use the same kind of format that we have with our Jordan Peterson meetups whenever we have read books, where we invite everybody to talk about what they got from the chapter. So if you read the chapter, then you would be able to participate. So let me see here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to do, get involved in another meeting on this, because it's indeed very rich what McGilchrist is doing, and pull out some of my own background in philosophy. Wonderful. And get something with this guy, Hubert Dreyfus, who on page 223 in McGilchrist's book, he's very complimentary about it, incorporates some of his ideas.
Go ahead. I've always wanted to ask you about this. We are going to be going through the book chapter by chapter. Would you like to join this team? You want to be one of the 4 people contributing?
I have to see about time, because
sure,
sometimes
we'll work out the time. Yeah, and it's no responsibility in the sense that you can just show up. If you can't make it, you can't make it. That's fine too. We're planning to either do it Tuesdays or Thursdays at 7 p.m. is something that everybody that looks like it's going to work for all of you, right? Joe, Becky, and Charlie. Okay.
For me too.
For you too also it works?
I think so, yes, most of the time.
Okay, and we're planning to do it, Joe, go ahead.
What happens with the DAO?
From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's Charlie would like to do this, every other week, so people have more time. This is a long book.
Yeah, and not only is it long, but it's deep. Okay,
it's deep.
It's deep. Yeah, so it's not something you skim through.
Right, exactly. And I would recommend keeping kind of readings relatively short, so that people can, actually read. So now the question is trying to decide between Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm going to give preference to Joe here, because Jeff is going to start a series soon, which Joe is going to help with also. So Joe, what do you think? If you want to think about it, that's fine. Do you prefer Thursdays, every other Thursdays for the other one, or would you prefer that this be on Tuesday?
I mean, Tuesdays would be best. I mean, but I'll leave it to Jeff to decide.
No. Jeff is going to do it on Thursdays.
Okay, then
so
Tuesday.
The question for you is, we can either do this book the Thursday on which Jeff is not doing this, because Jeff is going to do it once every other week, and because you're going to be part of both the meetups, right? So I'm going to give you a choice whether you would prefer to have all Thursdays, or would you prefer like some on Tuesdays and some on Thursdays?
But I think I think all Thursdays actually might be. Well, whatever. I would like to ask what Becky is too. She has a class.
No. We're going to start it after Becky's class gets over. Becky, when is your class?
No, it's good.
It's good Thursdays, right?
All Thursdays fine.
Charlie, Thursdays work?
All Thursdays.
Yeah, Thursdays would be fine.
Okay, Govard, Thursdays work? Okay. All right. So it's going to be Thursdays. And Jeff, when are you starting? You're starting 16th, right? Give me a second.
That's entirely possible. That's up to you.
Okay, now 16th is good. So we'll start 16th. And maybe we can start. So we'll figure out when to start the other one. Okay, let's discuss. But Thursdays, so it'll be Thursdays. Jeff, can you tell people quickly about what in 2 minutes about what your series is going to be about?
Sure. So the title of it is The Future of Leadership. And it is an exploration into purposes, concepts, theories, practices in this evolving world. It will have nothing to do with politics or current issues. It'll all be kind of a consideration of in a civil society, really, what is our philosophy? And as Shrikant really so eloquently said there, gaining everyone's perspectives, sort of the benefit of our considerations of of leadership and history, but especially our experience and our sense of kind of where all this might be going and what's going to be needed. And it is such a consequential subject. We talk about it all the time, about good leaders, bad leaders, whatever. It's a much more complex, multidimensional, multidisciplinary topic than we generally give it credit for. So we will explore it together. I've been studying it and teaching it for a couple decades to over 20,000 people across the world. And what I'm really interested in is getting the benefit of increased context from your different vantage points and perspectives and thoughts on the matter. So that's what we'll do. We'll ask a lot of questions. We'll have a lot of conversation. I'll put on the table a lot of different content, and we'll have some fun.
Wonderful.
Can I
Thank
ask
you.
a quick question? Are you going to be doing multicultural contexts? In other words, a lot of companies right now, they're having to deal with being in the United States and being in Japan, and the management have to be sensitive to both cultures, and so that multiculturalism, so to speak, within a leadership context is becoming very important.
It is among the contexts. It is among the nuances. Absolutely. I think what we will assume is various orientations to seeking to generate what we call, in Western culture, a civil society. And so that'll be the foundation on which we'll build it. But really the extent to which, what it is that we want from our leaders, how it is that they might be able to help us generate an authentic and ethical and inclusive and productive future, given all of the challenges and opportunities that await for us as
Wonderful.
human beings moving forward.
Thank you, Jeff. Really looking forward to it. So, folks, that starts at 7 p.m. on 16th. And what I'm proposing, folks, I know, Becky, you have a conflict on the 23rd, but I'm proposing that we start on 23rd because I don't want to wait for a whole month to start, because otherwise the first available would be 7th. So I would like to start on 23rd with the series on Master and Emissary. Is that okay, Becky? Okay, very good. All right, folks. So we will start this series on 23rd. So it gives whole 1, 2, 3 weeks for you to get the book if you would like. And what we're going to do is that we'll try to put videos there. Okay, we'll include videos, we'll include articles, we'll include all kinds of things, references on the Meetup page. So even if you can't read the whole chapter, you should feel free to attend, because we will make it accessible to everybody. And it's quite a team here. You know, there is going to be Joe, Becky, Govert, and Charlie. Okay, if you have not heard much from Govert, he's pretty impressive too. You know a lot about Joe and Becky already, and Charlie, we've known him for a shorter time, but so that it's a great team. And go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention the first edition in 2009 does not have a bibliography, but he came out with a second edition that has the bibliography. It was published in 2019, and you can get a Kindle copy from Amazon for I think it's like $10 or something like that. I forget. It's pretty cheap. So yeah, if you're going to buy a copy and money is a concern, consider a Kindle copy or something like that, because it's and it has the bibliography. That was one of the things when I first read the book, I was stuck with this copy. It didn't have a bibliography. I said, what is going on here? This is so crazy, because he has references all the way through the book, for the bibliography, and there's no bibliography. And it just, anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Charlie, hold on. I got a 2009 version, and there is a bibliography of 5 pages from 518 till 522.
Yeah,
but I do agree that some references are not there.
Yeah, if you get to 2019, it's like there's I don't know, 80 pages or something. It's a lot more.
Wonderful. All right, folks. So I'm going to call. So firstly, I invite you to join these. I want to give. Let's see, Mike, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, Mike, what are you going to do next Wednesday?
Oh yeah, I'm going to be following up. I did my first presentation about polymathic thinking and how interpersonal skills were very useful. Being able to communicate with a broad sense of, or a wide variety of people. And now I want to talk about something I'm calling thought and action fragmentation, which is sort of a roadblock that I'm finding common with a lot of people. I don't know whether it's due to technology or kind of receiving too much information, but I find myself trying to do something, for example, and my thoughts become fragmented. I'll give you an example from today. I'm trying to get solar panels on the co-op that I live in. So I'm Googling something about solar, and then the next time I went online, what pops up but a solar advertisement? And that led me to go to Amazon to buy something. Next thing I know, I have my eyes set on doing one thing. And before I know it, my thoughts and my actions have fragmented to different spots. So I want to talk about a couple of things. One, the phenomenon, and find out if other participants are experiencing the same thing and to what degree. And then I also wanted to talk about some of the things I'm using with students that help them avoid that. They're a little technical. I like the Pomodoro Method, for example, which is evidently the amount of time it takes to boil a tomato. But the method is you work 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about comes from a young person's perspective. And I'll end with this. I got online in 1994, and I've been teaching ever since, which means I'm already in my second generation of students who have spent their entire life. They've been online the entire time. So the way that I learned something when I was 15 or 16 is so different than the way somebody is learning it today. I have a couple of exercises that you'll do to prepare. You'll namely need 20 minutes of time, pen, and a paper. That's all you'll need to attend the meetup, but I hope you can make it. It should be a lot of fun talking about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. There is a related meetup this Saturday by Samantha. Samantha just started coming to the meetups only like a couple of weeks ago, but she's pretty incredible. And she's going to be talking about how internet is changing the patterns of thought and action in society. She's using, she's applying this philosophy of orientation. I don't really know. She's also using ideas of Marshall McLuhan, whom we have discussed quite thoroughly. So That is going to be Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, this Saturday on the 4th. All right, so I'm going to call this meetup over, but I want to continue talking to Charlie, Govert, Becky, and Joe about how we are planning to do this. Just brainstorm a little bit. You're welcome to stay or leave, whatever you prefer. Thank you very much.